بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد البشر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The ayah for today is إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. إياك, you, O Allah, we worship, and you, إياك literally means you. نعبد, we worship. وإياك, you, نستعين, we ask for help. So who is this you that إياك is referring to? This you is referring to Allah. Because in the initial part of Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah announces Himself, who He is, right? He explains to Himself. He is Al-Hamd, He is the Rabbil Alameen, He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and He is also Malik Yawmiddin. An interesting manner in which this is done is that it changes from third person to second person, right? So in the initial part, Allah just speaks about Himself. Allah is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Allah is Malik Yawmiddin. But then He changes the tense. Then the Surah Al-Fatiha, its tense changes. You, O Allah, do we worship, and you, O Allah, do we ask for help. So the tense changes from third person to second person. And one of the reasons for this is that within the Semitic languages, like Arabic and Hebrew and so forth, the change in tense in the manner in which you do things is part of eloquence. So traditionally we are taught, because we follow English and many other Romance languages, you find that a change in tense is discouraged. So that if you start writing, for example, if you start speaking in third person or in second person or in first person, you should stick to that. You shouldn't change tenses. However, part of eloquence in Arabic is that when you speak, you change tense. And within the Qur'an, you find that there's places where Allah does this. The most prominent is where Allah says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When my slave وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي, when my slave asks concerning me, فَإِنِّي, then most certainly I am near. And you find this is an interesting manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with supplication to Him, is that when he wants to, when he says things which are, so to speak, reaching out towards people, He changes the things. Like when I explained Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, I spoke about the ayah where Allah says, Ya ibadi, oh my abd. Allah doesn't say, oh abd, or oh individual, or oh mankind. Allah says, Ya ibadi. And the same when Allah speaks about you asking for Allah in dua, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي, when my abd asked concerning me. Another difference with another change that happens within Surah Al-Fatiha with this ayah is a change from ilm towards amal, right? And there's a well-known saying of Abu Hamid ibn Ahmad al-Tusi al-Khazali rahimahullah. Imam Khazali rahimahullah was born in the city of Tus, which is in Persia, which is modern day roundabout towards the border of Iran and Afghanistan. He was born in the year 450 Hijri. And Abu Hamid al-Khazali rahimahullah was one of the greatest scholars of the Islamic tradition. But at a very young age, he had reached high levels of brilliance. But then he had an internal spiritual crisis, and he started. You find that within his biography, you find that he goes through different levels of reasonings. Firstly, he starts with empirical evidence, and he looks at empirical evidence, and he says, from an epistemological point of view, empirical evidence has certain limitations, and you cannot come towards the truth based on empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is things which you see, things which you hear, things which you touch and smell. And empirical evidence has a place within our lives, but there are certain restrictions which you will find based on empirical evidence. And eventually it comes to the conclusion that the only real way to attain true knowledge, the only way to attain certainty of knowledge, is through spirituality. You have to go through a process of spirituality. There are things which the human soul just knows. The human being has what is referred to as a fitra, an innate inclination towards certain things. And an interesting fact, a theological fact that we should be aware of, well-known scholars, Islamic theologians, have come to this conclusion that they say, even though we are not of the opinion that our belief has to conform with rationality, you will find that even though our belief does not necessarily deal with rationality, our belief, even though it goes beyond rationality, it is in conformity with rationality. Let me give you an example of what I'm speaking to. We believe that in Jannah and Jahannam, right? You cannot prove based on empirical evidence or necessarily rational evidence that Jannah and Jahannam exist, or the existence of angels, or the existence of jinnat, right? Based on empirical evidence, you cannot prove it. You cannot necessarily prove it based on rational evidence either. But it is in accordance with rational evidence, and it does not go against empirical evidence, because if I give an example, I tell you that there's angels in this room, right? How do you measure angels? The measurement of angels is beyond what humanity is able to measure. Humanity is able to measure things such as, for example, heat, right? Humanity is able to measure things such as speed, right? Because they have certain mannerisms which they've used, certain procedures, for example, change in velocity or change in time. But what procedure do you go through to come to the conclusion that this is the formula that you use to measure angels? Do you have some sort of like angelicometer or something, like say, okay, this is a meter, now I'm going to look at angels. So it's beyond empirical evidence, it's beyond rational evidence, but it does not go against empirical or rational evidence. Also, an interesting piece of eloquence of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is that your attention is jolted because now it becomes a dialogue, right? Initially Allah is just speaking, right? Allah is Rabbul Alameen, Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Allah is Malik Yawmiddin. So now it becomes a dialogue. Now we say, yes, Allah is Ar-Rahman, Allah is Ar-Rahim. But now it becomes also dialogue. You, O Allah, we worship. And you, O Allah, do we ask well. Another interesting issue you'd find with this, and those of you who have done a bit of Arabic will realize that generally the pronoun comes after the verb, right? So if the general way to say we worship you would be na'buduka, we worship you. But in this you find that the pronoun dhamir comes before the verb, right? So traditionally in the Arabic language, in English it doesn't make sense, but traditionally in Arabic language the you would come after the verb, so it would be we worship you. But here it says you, we worship. And a couple of reasons for this is the emphasis is on Allah, right? Generally you can say I worship you, but you can say I worship you along with something else, and something else, and something else, and something else. But when you put the pronoun before the verb, it's almost as if you are saying, look, we worship you, O Allah, and you, O Allah alone. And this brings out the exclusivity of Allah and Allah's worship. And that is a very strong thing that comes out within Surah Al-Fatiha, this concept of Tawheed, this concept of Allah's oneness, Allah's absoluteness in the manner in which we approach and worship Allah. Another interesting fact is you would find that this is the plural form. إِيَّاكَ you, O Allah, نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ you, O Allah, نَسْتَعِينُ. So when we say we worship Allah. When you make salah, you say Allahu Akbar, right? It's you and your connection with Allah. It's you as an individual, right? Whether you read in Qur'an, whether you make salah, it doesn't matter. It's you and your connection with Allah. It's you and Allah alone. So why does Allah use the plural form? Why does the Quran say we worship? Why does it say we worship? an interesting manner in which this done. Firstly, it juxtaposes Allah with creation, right? And it's another strong theme that comes out in Surah Al-Fatiha. It juxtaposes Allah with His creation. You, O Allah, do we worship? So it brings towards an individual's attention that Allah is one and one alone. Allah is supreme and indivisible. What? I don't know. Who speaks English here? Allah cannot be divided into different parts. Allah is Allah and Allah alone. We don't believe in any concept of Allah being 4 in 1, 2 in 1, 3 in 1, or Allah can change or whatever. Allah is Allah. Khalas, end of story. Allah is Allah. In all absolute perfection, Allah is Allah. But we as creation, we are many. Right? So that is one of the that is one of the things which is juxtaposed. You, O Allah, who is one. All of us worship you, O Allah. And another reason why it has the plural form is because to show our connection with the Ummah. And there are many, and this is not unique within Surah Al-Fatiha, and it's also not unique within Salah. That many of our ritual and social acts of worship, it emphasizes the connection, the bond of brotherhood that the Muslim has with his Ummah, that the Muslim has with the rest of the Ummah and with the rest of humanity. Allah says in the Qur'an, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that the entire that those who have iman, they are brotherhood. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also says that al-mu'minu lil-mu'mini kal-bunyan yashuddu ba'duhu ba'da, that the mu'min, the one who has iman towards the other one, towards another individual who has iman, they are like a wall or like a structure. They strengthen each other. And the Prophet an indication of entwined fingers was made. The Prophet ﷺ, and within the Qur'an we find many examples of this bond of brotherhood, of this so to speak, this wall where Muslims and those who have iman are meant to strengthen each other. Another example is zakah or charity. It's part of strengthening the bonds between Muslims of different stratas within society, of different classes within society. People who are found on have different financial means. And and within Islam, it's not it's your situation. The relationship you have with Allah and your relationship you have with your fellow human beings is not determined by your situation. It's determined, as I said before, by your approach towards that situation. Another thing I would like to Another thing I would like to touch on is the conditions for ibadah. So we say, you are Allah, do we worship? What exactly is ibadah? Because everything in our life could potentially become ibadah. Standing here, eating, drinking, sleeping, all of that could become ibadah. When you look at acts of worship, making salah, fasting, going hajj, all of that could become ibadah. So there are a couple of conditions that have to be met in order for something to be considered ibadah, right? For example, when you give charity, is that an ibadah, or is it just you losing money, or just you felt sorry for the person on the road because you were just vererging you so much, you just give him the 2 rand or something like. How do you distinguish whether that is just normal charity where you just lost money, or whether it's actually ibadah? And there are a couple of criterion that you use to determine whether something is ibadah. Firstly, it should be done for Allah and Allah alone, right? There should not be any shirk in that, and that is important part. That's why Prophet ﷺ says that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that most certainly actions are with the intentions. So that is also comes out strong in the Quran. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, that most certainly those who believe and do good deeds. And these are two aspects. It's the belief that's behind the deed, and the deed itself. So just doing a deed without belief doesn't work. But just believing without deeds doesn't work either. You can't say, look, I believe you have to make salah, and then salah time you're sitting by Maryam's eating or something. It doesn't work like that. At the same time, if you make salah and it's for other than Allah, your salah, what's the point of salah? If you perhaps give charity and the charity is just for name and fame, whatever, if it's other for Allah, at the same time it doesn't count as ibadah. So ibadah has to be something which is done in action, but it's also done for Allah. Another concept of ibadah, and this is especially a ritual ibadah, is that it should be done within, it should conform to the prophetic sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ says, كل أمتي يدخلون الجنة إلا من أبى, that every single member of my ummah will enter Jannah except those who refuse. أمتي يدخلون الجنة إلا من أبى. قيل ومن يأبى يا رسول الله. Then he asked the Prophet ﷺ, but who would refuse? And that's like a normal question you'd ask. The Prophet ﷺ says, all of you will enter Jannah, but not if you refuse. And the normal thing that comes to mind, like, what kind of sane person would refuse to enter Jannah? قيل ومن يأبى يا رسول الله. Prophet ﷺ said, من أطاعني دخل الجنة ومن عصاني فقد أبى. That most certainly the person who follows me, he will enter Jannah. ومن عصاني, and the one who disobeys, فقد أبى, he has refused entering to Jannah. And another aspect, and this is interesting, because when we utter our testification of faith, there are two aspects, right? There's ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that I testify there's none worthy of worship but Allah. And this is the first concept of ibadah, that it's done for Allah, right? And then the second part of our testification, Muhammadun Rasulullah, and this is the second part of ibadah. So the first part is ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ibadah should be done for Allah. And the second part is وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is Allah's messenger. And that's the second part of ibadah. It should be done within the prophetic mold. And this is what is referred to as the zahir and the batin of ibadah. You have the outward and then you have the inward. And just because it's the outward doesn't necessarily mean it's in line with Islamic principles. At the same time, just because it's the inward at the same time doesn't mean it's in line with Islamic principles. That's why this hadith, if I remember correctly, the hadith, I didn't check this one up, if I remember correctly, the hadith is found in Sahih Muslim. إن الله لا ينظر إلى صوركم ولا أجسامكم ولكن ينظر إلى قلوبكم وأعمالكم. That most certainly Allah does not look at إن الله لا ينظر إلى صوركم وأجسامكم. That most certainly Allah does not look at your form, nor that does Allah look at your body. Alright, Allah doesn't look at your shape nor your body, and that is important when we understand the concept of beauty, because Allah says in the Quraan that that humanity has been created with beauty. وَصَوَّرَكُمْ فَأَحْسَنَ صُوَرَكُمْ, that Allah has molded you with the best of molds. So if you look at another individual and you don't see beauty within that, the problem is not with the individual, the problem is with yourself, because Allah Rabbul Jalal said Himself that within the creation of humanity is the creation of humanity has been created in the mold which is the best of molds. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَى صُورِكُمْ وَلَا أَجْسَامِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. But Allah looks at your hearts and your actions. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَى صُورِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُم. And then we come to nasta'in. Nasta'in is actually also an act of ibadah. There's a dua, or there's a saying that goes, dua mukhul ibadah, that dua, seeking and beseeching Allah, supplicating to Allah, is the essence, it's the quintessential part of ibadah. And one of the reasons for that is, in what was it, 2 lessons ago I think it was, I mentioned the relationship between Rabb and Al-Alameen. And the relationship between our Rabb and Al-Alameen is that we are in need of Allah, but Allah is not in need of us. And the basis for human belief is exactly that, is that we are in need of Allah, but Allah is not in need of us. And the basis of ibadah, of our religion, is to create that bond, to create that connection between the creation and the creator. And that is essentially what dua is. Right? When you ask Allah, that is essentially what you're doing. You are fomenting, you are cementing, you are creating that bond between yourself and Allah, which is why when you supplicate to Allah, it is such an important part of ibadah. If I've said anything out of line, I ask you forgiveness and correction. If I've said anything correct, I also make dua. Every time I ask questions, there are no questions. So, are there any questions? Nope.
questions?
Is there any questions from the ladies?
You?
وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Yo, Muslim.
Mati.